locomotive.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I will let you know you'll get it. I will give you, if you have 20 minutes, I will give you a hands up when you're down to 5 minutes, so you can wrap up if you go over the time.
Yes,
You don't
sir.
have to use it all, but I'm gonna make sure you stay on time, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, so I'm Will Christian,
I'm Sam Hodge. I'm Greg Filiatro.
and this is the Auburn University team for the IANA case competition.
So it looks like the clicker's not working.
Turn it on or push the space bar.
We're just doing this, guys, to see how y'all.
First group, technical difficulties every time.
Yeah, you're working great.
Alright,
yeah,
we can restart. We can
Okay,
Alright, restart. Let's go ahead.
Yeah.
So this is IANA case competition by the Auburn University team. We'll start with the company overview of MBE. It's a parcel delivery service operating both in the U.S. and overseas, and starting to break into the e-commerce industry and use that to solicit orders. Its operations include the pickup services from the retail store or home or business, taking it to a sorting facility, and then the line haul and delivery to the final destination. And this is done through 3 equipment options, which is a 28-foot trailer, a 53-foot trailer, and a 53-foot container. And for this assignment, we're operations analysts for MPE, where we're assigned 4 lanes. And these lanes go from Los Angeles to Madison, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Rochester, New York. And our goal with these lanes is to optimize the cost by using certain equipment on these routes, and then also maintaining our service level. And our biggest constraints with that are the 16,300 capacity we have going from LA to Chicago, and also the 5-day delivery time, for which this case would be Friday by 1 a.m.
So for the considerations that we went into, we had to analyze the different delivery networks, so the entire process of actually shipping through it. So it starts off in the LA sorting facility, then it moves to the LA intermodal facility, and from there it's taken onto rail to the Gateway Intermodal Terminal, and then sent to the Chicago sorting facility. From there it's sorted and sent out to its final destinations. Some of the biggest fixed intermodal costs that we experienced were the rail rates that went with the different equipment that were being used, and then the shuttling costs that went from the LA sorting facility and the Gateway Intermodal facility to the Chicago sorting facility. Now, as an added cost to the Chicago sorting facility, we had to take into consideration the 5-cent fees that went with unpacking each package, sorting each package, and then once again, packaging each package again. From there, once the trailers have been packed, we had to take into consideration the cost per mile that came with each container, each trailer that we used. So either with a single 28-foot trailer and the 53-foot trailer, there was a $2 cost per mile, and a $2.06 cost per mile for the 28 container, 28-foot trailers, and then $2.12 cost per mile with the 3 trailers. Now, some of the biggest considerations taking into account these costs per mile was, and in addition to the ownership costs of the actual equipment being used each day that it is used, was the miles that we had to take into consideration after you get it to the Chicago sorting facility, which is, Wisconsin had 153 miles, Pittsburgh had 465, and then Rochester had 606 miles to get to its final destination, along with the capacity needed for each destination. And with each different trailer, we had to take into consideration the actual, there's 2,058 packages that went with the domestic container, which holds just a little bit less than the 53-foot trailer, but costs significantly less as far as the rail rates went. The 53-foot trailer that held 2,126 packages, and then the 28-foot trailer that holds 1,060 packages. So, as Will mentioned earlier, the biggest considerations that we had to take into account with the capacity that we had to deal with each trailer, and then the amount of time that we had to deal with to uphold those high customer service rates. So the biggest cost to our schedule was the actual time that it took to go on rail, which is 48.5 hours from the LA terminal to the Gateway Intermodal terminal, and then the possible Chicago sorting time. It took 12 hours.
So now that we know really what are our considerations for this network, really what we're getting into is going to be the solution. So the biggest things that, of course, are going into these models that we built for our solution are, of course, going to be, as Will mentioned, and I'm just going to hit on again, is that are they meeting those delivery times? Are we going to have the same level of service that people expect out of NPE? And then really, are we meeting that capacity as well? Are we having enough room to get those packages there? We found when we were doing our solution that the most optimized way to do this was to build two separate models for our network. The first one being from the initial LA to Chicago route, and then building it from Chicago on the subsequent lanes all the way to their final destinations. Of course, one of those being Chicago. We utilized a Excel add-in feature solver in order to best build out these models and then put in those ingredients, those costs and capacities that Greg was mentioning, so that way we could best build these models. So for our first solution that we got here, and this is our most optimized model, we utilized 8 53-foot domestic containers, and that's for our first route. That would be from LA to our Gateway facility and then to our Chicago sorting facility. And then after that, what we utilized is we used 3 28-foot trailers, and then we used 3 53-foot trailers. So we used our first 53-foot trailer, and that's going to be taking it from the sorting facility after these packages from the 8-foot or from the 8 containers. After they were processed through the sorting facility, they were then separated into these. So the first one, it goes to Madison, Wisconsin, and then we use 2 other 53-foot trailers to the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania location. And finally, we used 3 28-foot trailers to the Rochester, New York facility. These trailers, 2 of them would be twinned together, which would then get that 206 rate that Greg was speaking of. And then one, as is mentioned in the case, would be twinned together to another trailer that is coming from a separate origin, but still going to that Rochester, New York location. I think one key thing that I want to point out here is that yes, technically you could see containers. We know that containers do travel on the road all the time. But if you looked at into NPE's network, they really do not feel comfortable putting these containers on the road, given that they're not very aerodynamic, and they have a lot of excess fuel surcharges. So that's why we changed them into these trailers that are a little bit, they're better at going across the road, and we can be safe in that way. So again, this is our network of getting it. We're utilizing that Chicago sorting facility with this, and we are utilizing the rail to get there. There was options. We could have taken a truckload option from the LA facility and taken it to their final destination. We ran those models, but just using the rail was more optimized. We had lower costs doing it that way. So to kind of break down some of the costs that we're looking at. On that first leg, we're looking really at the drayage cost. That rail cost is going to be really our most sizable cost there. We're looking at our ownership with those 53-foot containers. We're looking at our second drayage cost, which is going to, again, be from that Gateway facility to our sorting facility. And then we're looking at those unpacking, sorting, and repacking costs. And then you're gonna move into our second leg. Of course, we'll have different ownership costs because we'll be utilizing different equipment on that second leg. And then we're gonna have separate transportation costs. That'll be to our final destination. Those are based off of what our truckload rates are. We used single drivers for this as well. We found that for this, we had plenty of time to utilize a single driver with having that 2-hour switching out for the Rochester, New York, of course, because they couldn't get there in one 500-mile haul. And then ultimately came to our total cost, which was $34,738, and that accumulates to about $2.13 per package. I'll use some time going and write that stuff down. I know it's a lot. And so just kind of moving forward, this was our first model, again, that 5-day method. But then the case we were further challenged as an analyst, okay, what if you had to do it in 4 days? We know, especially with this industry, a lot of times people are challenging even 2-day shipping. So they challenged us, well, how about if we took 4 days? And so this is going to move us into our part 2 solution and looking really heavily at the time being our biggest constraint in this model. When we ran this solution, we found that really we were needing to make up about 12 hours. Is that, of course, our Rochester, New York was going to be our furthest away shipment. It's going to take the most time. And so what we did is we analyzed, okay, how much time do we need to actually save in this model? And we came to, it was 12 hours that we needed to save. So what we did is we found that the best way to save this 12 hours was, again, if you go back to the time constraints that Greg laid out, there's that 12-hour time cost, really, to be at the sorting facility. And so what we did is we decided that we would add the cost of utilizing our higher trailer rates on the rails, and basically have all of these packages in their final containers, prepared for final destination at the LA facility. So of course, from the LA facility, we then ship them by rail the same exact way, but you're bypassing that Chicago facility. So again, you're going to be going from the LA sorting facility. You'll be taking the rail with those final equipment numbers. And you'll be bypassing that Chicago facility. Of course, other than the 8,000 packages that are going, we will still utilize 4 domestic containers to take those that are going to the Chicago area. We're looking at this, ultimately we looked at, again, that initial drayage cost, a little bit higher because we did have to utilize more equipment for this. Our rail costs, again, were a little bit higher because we utilize trailers, which are going to be more expensive than those containers. And then here are our ownership costs, again, laid out, and then those final transportation numbers, which are, again, the same as what they were originally. And then when we get down to it, the total cost for this, we found the most optimized cost is going to be $39,015, which accumulates to about $2.39 per package. That's our solution.
Any questions?
Yeah,
On the first scenario, was the Chicago cost included? I saw only 3 lanes in the transport cost piece there.
So our Chicago cost, the Chicago, the sorting facility right here,
Yeah.
that is our final destination
For 8,000 packages.
for those 8,000 packages. So that cost is I guess the transportation cost for Chicago is really, it's included in that second drayage cost, taking it from the gateway facility to the sorting facility. Yeah.
So just real quickly, first of all, thanks guys, but real quickly, y'all, on the second solution, y'all ran trailers from LA to Chicago, not cans, right?
Is that correct?
We ran trailers on the rail.
On the rail,
On the
yes,
rail,
sir.
okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then last question is, did y'all run teams at all east of Chicago, or is it all single?
It's
No,
all
sir.
single driver.
We did the single driver. We found that even as long as we cut out that sorting facility, we saved that 12 hours there, so we could still use those single driver rates. Yes, sir.
So whenever you were using containers, I did not see any allocation of cost for the use of the chassis. Did you include that anywhere?
Yes, sir. I believe we did include that at $7 per day for the chassis, and so we had utilized it one day to get from the LA facility to the rail, and then another day from the gateway facility to get to the sorting facility.
That's maybe your ownership cost, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Chassis, no, maybe that's not, I might be wrong on that, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Yeah, the ownership cost is separate of
Okay,
the
all right,
chassis.
okay.
I know it was built into the model. It might not have been
Specifically.
highlighted in our slides, but that $7 cost was built in, yes, sir.
With the 60 cents maintenance fee per day.
Did you take a look at all of the direct truck costs from LA out to the Chicago area in case of a rail issue or a derailment or something blocking their lines?
We did. We looked at the rail, or at the rail cost as opposed to taking just truckload to Chicago. Of course, those fees were higher, but they weren't substantially higher. So if there was an issue with the rail, those would be similar enough that it would be effective to do that.
And as we said before, we ran the model of taking by highway to all destinations to see if any of those broke the cost.
It'd be more of a time issue, really. If you're
Right.
And it,
trucking it over the road, you're not gonna get the 48 hours unless you're using teams.
exactly.
Even then, I'm not
Exactly,
sure.
yeah.
One of the main considerations is we wouldn't be using single driver if we were to ship from LA. It would definitely be team driver because they're able to cover more distance, the 1,100 miles a day.
And y'all did two service scenarios. The first one was a 5-day service, I think, and then the second one was a day better.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
It was a
Okay.
4-day
Day zero
service.
would start on Tuesday
Zero is-
instead of Monday.
Okay, 0 is your pickup day.
Yes,
And then, so day 5 would be,
It would be,
I wonder how y'all count weekends, I just,
it was, you go back,
so it'd be Monday delivery?
yeah, it was Friday,
Friday
it'd be
at 1
Friday
a.m.
morning.
would be
So
the-
it'd be Friday at 1 a.m. would be the time that it needs to arrive at that final destination. And I believe they said it needs to be there by 1 a.m. so it can get out for shipment by 8 a.m. Through the local service.
So when you was determining your single versus a team,
Yes, sir.
what was your transit mile per hour? How many hours was that single
It was
versus
actually
a
close
team?
enough. It was the exact same. We even took that into consideration. It was 45 miles per
Okay.
hour.
You got laid in break times?
Yes,
That's
sir.
required?
Exactly. The main thing that we had to take into consideration as far as that goes is with the team driver, if we were actually to do something like that, is instead of having to take that 2-hour switch off period, they have the additional driver they can just switch to.
Exactly.
So in 24 hours, they can cover 1,100 miles, whereas for the single driver, it's 500 miles
Yeah, it's 500 miles for
11
11 hours, and then you need a 2-hour switch-off time. So we essentially boiled that down to, including switch-off, including breaks, you can go 500 miles in 13 hours, which is, that's how we broke down that 45 miles per hour.
What was the distance from Chicago to Rochester?
From
Uh,
Chicago to
six-
Rochester was 606 miles.
Yeah, 606. So we were 106 miles over, but if you, they could still make it in that first solution, given, or they could make it in both solutions, but they had to switch off
Given the
drivers.
amount of time. We believe that
So
we had
you
enough
used-
time.
You used 2 drivers,
We,
2 trucks, or
so the way that the case seemed to bring it about was that you would use one driver, would take it 500 miles, and there would be a 2-hour switch off, where another driver would then take it
Same trailer.
the same trailer, the last 106 miles. Any more questions?
I would like clarification on, you said the difference between a container and a trailer. Why would you choose the container versus a trailer, and how is it more aerodynamic? I mean, how would you make that, how would you sell that?
The rib sides on the domestic containers make it a lot less aerodynamic on the highways. So they didn't specify the exact cost that goes with it, but they said there were significant additional fueling costs that goes with it, along with a $10,000 additional acquisition fee.
I believe also that NPE, the reason why they did not want to utilize these containers was because they had to lease their chassis. And so they own the trailer chassis, of course, and so they didn't want to lease a chassis for a truckload run. They're okay with doing drayage with them, but they don't want to do a truckload run with a leased chassis.
And like we said, it was $7 a day with the 60-cent maintenance fee.
So real quick question on your kind of the model y'all use. You said what the name of it was a while ago. It's Excel something.
Solver, it's an optimization add-in
Okay.
that Excel has. So basically,
Well, how do you spell that?
as Solver, so it's SOLVER.
Oh, I wrote down sulfur. I was like, sulfur, okay, I'll look that up.
Okay, cool.
Sulfur, okay.
So basically what it does is you can build a model. I mean, you still have to know what you're doing. You still have to be able to build in all of the costs and everything. But what it allows you to do is you put in, okay, I want to minimize this, which for us was our cost, but then put in the constraints that you need to make sure that you're still allotting enough capacity to get our packages to their final destination.
Or even the time constraint.
And then it would manipulate the different types of containers and the numbers
It
there.
basically, yeah, it runs through all of the different scenarios, and then it will print out what is your most optimized solution.
Y'all run a bunch of different iterations, I assume. Is it
Yes,
easy
sir.
to iterate?
It is, yes, yes.
Ah, cool.
Once you know what you're doing,
Oh,
initially it's awful.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because I hadn't heard of it before. It sounds pretty cool.
Yes, sir.
It is, it's a very helpful tool.
It is, optimizing anything takes a lot less time.
Sure. No, great.
Any more questions?
I just have a comment too, because Brian brought up the chassis. If you, just take into consideration, if you're delivering at 1 AM and you've got a container, you can't turn that chassis back in, so you have to add 2 days to that.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
you need to put that in there or consider that.
I did not think about that, yeah. I just-
On either end, because your chassis pool may not be open the same hours that you're delivering, so you would need an extra day.
Yeah.
On maybe both ends,
Which
depending
is-
on what day it arrives and delivers.
Yeah, which would be an additional.
Yeah, it would be. But I think the ones, when we were looking at it, our chassis being used would be used from 6 AM to 7 AM. That's when it's at LA, is gonna be from 6 AM to 7 AM, so we could return it same day in that instance. And then when they were being utilized in Chicago, it was from 8:30 AM to 9:30 AM.
So then you have congestion at City Money there.
Yeah, then we'll have to add fees. Yes, ma'am.
And in real life, along with that, every time you have to add a truck to go touch that piece of equipment, your cost just went up.
Yeah.
So real life, I want to give you guys 30-second comment for y'all. This is totally, it's not what it is. When UPS, that's all floor-loaded freight. It's not palletized. It's not secure. Okay. In a double stack container environment, that freight runs very smoothly. And so there's always an advantage to a double stack container vis-a-vis a trailer, either on a railroad or a highway, because trailers are wandering around and they're stopping and starting. So because there's a lot of loss and damage and theft involved sometimes with parcels, it's always kind of cool to think about that. It wasn't part of y'all's case, but it's always kind of cool to think about the advantages of a double stack environment on the railroad. Just kind of cool. It's
That is,
And anytime you translate.
Transloading
You have
those days.
a higher risk of theft
So that's
and
the-
damage and pilferage and.
yeah,
UPS, their parcel industry love containerization when they can,
that's
for
awesome.
those reasons.
Oh, okay, very cool.
That's cool.
Next time we'll build that into this.
Well, you can impress your friends with all that.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we might like going back and doing that. Any more questions?
Good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Don't worry.
Where are you? Tomorrow night's a big day for us. Not that this wasn't a big day. But we got a lot
This
going
day
on.
will last forever.
Exactly. Tomorrow could be ruined very quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.